Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azawi. The war on Iraq 2003 effectively neutralized an implacable enemy of Israel. The Iraqi army, once a great concern to Israeli military generals, was defeated and disbanded. Iraqi Prime Minister Al-Maliki is faced with balancing the interests of the Americans and the passions of his people. When it comes to Israel, the two are often incompatible. Some Iraqi political factions want to normalize relations with Israel, but most Iraqis remain deeply hostile. So, if Iraq is today no longer part of an Arab front facing Israel, is it only a question of time before Baghdad joins the Arab fold?
The swearing in of Benjamin Netanyahu as the new Israeli Prime Minister has raised concerns over the future of any Middle East peace process. When questioned on those prospects, US President Barack Obama recently stated that peace efforts in the Middle East would not be easy with a new right-wing government under Netanyahu.
It's not easier than it was, but I think it's just as necessary.
When Israel launched its war on Gaza last December, the Arab world was outraged. But Iraq seemed conspicuously quiet. There was little in the way of any strong denouncement. In 1990, Saddam Hussein had threatened to burn Israel. He claimed that Iraq was ready, in his words, to put an end to Zionism. But Iraq today is a very different place. Iraq's army was defeated and disbanded following the 2003 US-led invasion. And Iraqi leaders today are expected to fall in line with US political interests in the Middle East. US combat forces are due to be withdrawn from Iraq in August 2010. If the withdrawal goes ahead, this may well be a defining moment for a drawdown of American influence on the ground in Iraq. Questions are being raised about whether this pullout might make Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri Al-Maliki more vocal in speaking out about both American and Israeli policies in the Middle East. Ahead of the US troop pullout, Iraq is scheduled to hold parliamentary elections at the end of this year. Political alliance building is already taking place, and Iraq's link to American interests, including Israel, is likely to be a key election issue in the minds of many Iraqis.
To disentangle myth from reality about the relationship between Israel and Iraq, I am joined by two powerful speakers. Anas Al-Tikriti is an Iraqi analyst, and Mordechai Kidar from Bar Ilan University. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Iraq. Mordechai Kidar, Israel played a significant role in spurring the United States to attack Iraq. I can cite you quotations by reams about Israeli generals as well as politicians spurring the US to invade Iraq. And yet now, most Israelis, they say, we did not play any part in it. Actually, the target should have been Iran and not Iraq.
Well, the only one who can say whatever was there is President Bush, because when he met Ariel Sharon for several times, maybe 9 times, only with no secretaries, no registration, nothing, I think only Bush knows what really was between both the president and the prime minister. Every other guy is only rumors and rumors and rumors.
And yet, Anas Al-Tikriti, if you go back to pre-2003 and read Israeli papers as well as quote by Israeli politicians, Iraq has WMDs. Iraq is a mortal enemy of Israel. Iraq is going to change the entire Middle East. And yet, you just listen to Mordechai Kidar, who's a true reflection of a denial, a belated denial by Israelis. They say, we had nothing to do with it.
Well, I didn't actually get the denial. Mordechai just mentioned that only Sharon knows, and Sharon obviously we can't ask, and Bush we can't ask at this moment of time. However, I think that no one can actually deny the fact that Israel's fingerprints are all over Iraq, not just since 2003, but way, way before that. In fact, during the 90s, even if we go back to the 80s, and striking into the nuclear facilities during the 90s, and operating actively through intelligence and military personnel in the no-fly zone in the northern area of Iraq, and then the lead-up to the invasion and the occupation in 2003. One thing is very, very important, and I don't think anyone can deny this. Regardless of Israel's perception whether Iran was a more important target than Iraq, that is no denial that Iraq was a very important target for Israel. And the fact is that a strong, unified, solid Iraq does not serve the best interests of Israel. And therefore, I think that Israeli policy and strategy went towards weakening and compromising Iraq in that sense.
Mordechai, here's your chance to refute that argument.
Iraq as a state was never a problem. The problem was the dictator who was there. And if Israel had any part in decapitating this dictator, I think Israel has to be proud of this, because Israel gave the best gift to the Iraqis by freeing them from this dictator who was eating them for breakfast and for lunch and for supper. And I think that Anas knows this much better than me, what Saddam Hussein did to his own people. So if Israel was there to encourage the Americans to decapitate Saddam Hussein, I think for Israel it's a source of pride and not source of shame.
But Mordechai, that's not the point. The point is, and Jassim knows, and everyone also who knows me know, that I'm not an apologist for Saddam Hussein or the former regime. However, I would also laugh in the face of your claim that Israel's heart was bleeding for the Iraqi people. I don't think that that was the case. I think that despite all the faults, and they are incredible faults of the previous regime, Iraq did, and for a very, very long time, proved to be a significant thorn in the side of Israel. The fact of the matter is that Iraq merely provides a case in the whole matter of Israel and its pursuit of the so-called peace. Israel, when it talks about peace, it talks about peace for Israel and Israel alone. It does not serve the best interests of Israel in the view and the mindset of strategists and leaders in Israel, that any other country, particularly those with significant armed forces such as Iraq had and enjoyed for many decades, it is not in their best interest for those states and countries to be strong, and therefore Israel did all it can in order to encourage dissidents, to encourage factions, and not for the best interest of the Iraqi people. The war itself, I mean, you say that the Iraqis should actually be grateful for Israel for decapitating Saddam Hussein. I don't think that you'll be very, very hard pressed to find any Iraqi today being thankful either to Israel or to the Americans for what they find themselves in today.
Because the price is too high for removing for any regime. Over 1 million people got killed and more than 5 to 6 million are banished. But let's go back to our subject, and that is, immediately after the 1990 war stopped, when Iraq lobbed approximately 33 missiles at Israel, many Israeli generals, as well as the prime minister at the time, they said, this will not go unpunished. We will make sure that Saddam will not see another day, another war. That's exactly what happened.
I still remember the 1991 war. I fully remember it. What we understood, that this is the retaliation of Saddam Hussein against what we did 10 years earlier in 1981 when we smashed his Tammuz reactor. And so it was some kind of closing the account between Saddam and Israel.
Except Mordechai Kedar, Israel played a significant role in the prolongation of the sanctions from 1991 to 2003. Pretty much you bled Iraq because of what happened in 91.
We didn't have anything against Iraq. The problem was the regime, the little group which held the grip on the necks of the Iraqis. And if we had a part in taking the and throwing away, I think this is a source of pride for Israel, as I said before. But what I want to tell you something. I have many Iraqi friends who correspond with me through email. You have no idea how many Iraqis want to come to Israel and to sit here in Tel Aviv and to feel at home, and they are most welcome.
Let me get a response from Anas. How about that? The Iraqis are longing to be good friends of Israel. I see you laughing.
Yes, it's extremely laughable. I think that the problem here is that Mordechai, being an academic, someone whom I respect in terms of his professional post, but the problem is that he reflects a serious problem within Israel. And that is the grand state of denial. What Mordechai ought to realize is that at this moment of time, Israel's worst enemy is Israel itself.
Anas Tikriti, what evidence you have that Iraq has become an operational theater, whether for the Mossad or for other parts of Israeli intelligence services?
Well, first and foremost, Iraq was always a theater for Israeli activity. Whether back in the 50s we have images of Moshe Dayan visiting certain Iraqi factions back then, and throughout, as I said, the Iraq-Iran war, and then during the 90s when we had the no-fly zones, and then the lead up to the invasion and the war. The fact that Janet Kaprinsky, the former head of US prisons in Iraq, someone who is partly implicated for the Abu Ghraib torture scandal, when she spoke to the BBC telling them that she had met an Israeli interrogator who had taken part in the interrogation of certain Iraqi detainees and prisoners. And ever since, the promping up, the kind of sexing up of a dossier about the WMDs. Now, when we talk about the WMDs laughingly, the weapons of mass destruction, we only mention Blair and Bush. But what about the role of the Israeli intelligence in providing information that actually sort of brought the Americans and the British dragging to Iraq simply because it told them that the WMDs in the possession of Saddam Hussein were to provide a threat not only to Israel, but to America and to Britain.
We'll take a short break now. Stay with us.
Israel has long feared the prospect of a Syrian-Iraqi coalition. In 1973, the last-minute entrance of Iraqi forces almost saved the Golan Heights for the Syrians. Removing the threat of an Eastern coalition alters the entire Israeli position regarding a war from the east. Major General Yaakov Amidror, Israeli National Defense College.